There we go. Hey, Susie, can you hear me?
I can. How's it going, Danny?
It's going well. How are you doing?
I am good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I really appreciate it. I hear you had a busy day today, or I'm presuming based on what you told me yesterday.
Well, yeah, I live 2 hours from work, so it's my fault, isn't it? Because I have to go 2 hours into work, and then I have to go to work, and I have to come 2 hours back again. And I had drinks tonight, but you'll be pleased to hear that in your honor, I did not drink in the pub. So I am stone cold sober, which is unusual at this time of night, but I
You
am.
didn't
So
have
there
to
we
do
go.
that for us, Susie. Shoot.
Well, also it's dry January, so I had another reason as well,
Oh,
right?
okay.
No
That makes
fun, no
sense.
fun in my life right now.
Well, I mean, this new paper is hopefully that's brought about some fun. Were you going out in celebration of the paper tonight, or would you have been doing this
uh,
otherwise?
Actually not. No, it was a colleague's leaving drink. So no, I did. It wasn't in celebration, but I'm going to save the celebrations to next time that I see all the team on the paper because it's very much a
Nice.
joint one. So
Okay,
yeah.
excellent. Yeah. Um, let's just dive in, I suppose. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Susie. Who is Dr. Susannah Maidment?
I'm a paleontologist at the Natural History Museum in London. That's pretty much it. So yeah, I've worked at the Natural History Museum since 2017. And yeah, I'm a researcher. So my job is just to do research at the museum.
Nice. It's funny. I was a little confused, I think, about what your role is exactly because you do so many different things. You're working up in Birmingham. What's your title there?
I just have an honorary position there. So they
Honorary
uh,
position.
they
Okay.
uh, they give me an honorary title, which is
Mm-hmm.
where I get the title prof, which means something slightly different in the UK than it does in the US.
Okay,
But
gotcha.
then I run a field trip for them, or I co-lead a field trip for them once a year for their undergraduate. Third year undergraduates to Utah, which is of course a massive hardship, as you can imagine, because basically, not being actually a member of staff, I just sort of go and bimble about and crack jokes
Uh-huh.
whilst the other people have to do all the kind of organizing and the admin and stuff like that. So yeah, it's an enormous hardship. And we get to dig up some dinosaurs with Josh Lively. Do you know Josh? He's great. He's out there in Utah and he digs up ankylosaurs. So we go dig up some
Yeah.
ankylosaurs with him.
Well, shoot, that's where we saw you back in September. We had you on
Oh, of
screen
course, yeah,
briefly.
of course. There
Yeah.
we were. There we were with you there. Yeah, yeah.
Some people in the chat, I think, recognize you, and other people say, Hamster Rain says, I already like Susie. So is,
Thanks.
I think I said this in the questions that I sent you that like a big part of what we try and do here on this channel is trying to humanize scientists to a general audience, and you make that so easy, Susie. So I really appreciate it. Um, yeah, tell
Well,
us
I've
a little
already
bit
told you all
about.
about my drinking habits, right? So there you go.
There you
You've
go.
got
Yeah.
most of me.
Um, let's get into your background a little bit. So, like, where did you grow up? How'd you get interested in fossils? How'd you get to where you are right now?
So I'm from the southern UK, which is actually, if it wasn't all covered in trees and houses, we would
Hmm.
have as many dinosaurs here as we do in the Western US. So the
Right.
rocks under me right now are from the Wealden group, which are early Cretaceous in age, and they have some of the first dinosaurs ever found. So actually, Gideon Mantell, who found the teeth that were first, he realised these were the remains of giant reptiles that were extinct, and nobody else had ever, have realized this before. So he found the first dinosaur, if you like. He actually lived in the town that I live in right now. So I'm a sort of historic kind of dinosaurs are in my blood historically, I think I would say. But the yeah, I studied geology as an undergrad, and then so my background's very much the rocks, and I love the rocks still do lots of geology. When I was a kid, I spent lots of time finding ammonites. I went on holiday to what is now one of our World Heritage Sites in the UK. So this is on the Jurassic Coast, where Mary Anning found lots of marine reptiles. So I spent lots of time going on holiday there, found marine reptiles there.
Nice.
And so yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. I guess when I was about seven, my grandpa asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up,
Hmm.
and I thought that I'd probably quite like to be a scientist. I think I had in my head that you have a scientist wears a white coat and kind of pours, I don't
Right.
know, colored liquids into jars and they explode and stuff. And I thought that sounded quite cool. Um, and he said, well, what sort of scientist do you want to be? And I don't think I knew that there were different sorts of scientists. And so I said that. And he said, well, why don't you be a dinosaur scientist? Because,
Uh-huh.
you know, um, you like dinosaurs because I was seven, right? Because everyone likes dinosaurs when they were seven. I had
Oh
like a
yeah.
dinosaur money box and, inflatable stegosaurus or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And so he said, well, why don't you be a dinosaur scientist? So I thought, okay, well, that seems fine. So that's what I
Nice.
did.
All right. Yeah. So let's set the stage here for this paper that the whole dinosaur world is abuzz with right now. Let's talk to the audience a little bit about what Europe was like at this time. Uh, paint a picture for us.
Okay, well, we're working in the late Cretaceous of Central Europe, and actually, throughout most of the Cretaceous period, Europe was an island archipelago. So we're on the margins of a kind of tropical sea, the Tethys, and
Mm-hmm.
we've got the continent to the north of us is the Fenno-Scandian Shield, so that's kind of to the north, and then the whole of Europe, sea level is much higher than today, so the whole of Europe is just an island archipelago. And actually, it's a little bit difficult to establish exactly where and when those islands existed. But
Right.
we have had, and how connected they were to each other as well. But we
Right.
have had, we have evidence of dinosaurs either in marine deposits throughout the Cretaceous of Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and then sometimes in terrestrial deposits as well.
Hmm.
And from the Central European basin, we have quite a lot of terrestrial deposits from this time
Right.
period.
The analogy that I like to use, I may have actually gotten this from Jim Kirkland, is that it's kind of like modern day Indonesia, this archipelago of
Yeah,
islands. Yeah,
yeah, that's
and like,
probably fair.
and maybe even a
Yeah.
similar climate, maybe a little bit less
Yeah,
tropical because it's not as near the equator. But if we're just trying to like get people to imagine this, and then those islands would have been constantly joining up via land bridges, and then the land bridges get inundated. Like this whole place is going to be in flux all the time, right?
right, exactly. Because we've got lots of tectonics going on.
Uh huh.
We've got the Atlantic opening, we've got things going on with Tethys, but
Right.
we've also got basins, yeah, sea level changes and major eustatic sea level changes happening as well. So yeah, islands are going to be joining up. They're going to be getting bigger and smaller. And actually mapping that is really hard. It's
Yeah,
quite
I
difficult
can
to
imagine.
figure out, how long those islands persisted for and where exactly they were.
Uh huh. Was there a lot of volcanism at the time too? Do you find a lot of ashes?
Um, I don't know. So
Huh.
I'm going to put my
I
hands
don't
up
either.
here,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
have not done this field work. So this field work is not me. So I've not been
Right.
out and
Okay.
studied these rocks. I'm not aware that there's tons of volcanism. I don't think that
Mm-hmm.
we have really exceptional, for example, uh, really exceptionally dated sequences. And I would think that if we did have lots of volcanism, we would have very, very accurately
I
dated
would think
sediments, and I
so.
don't think
Yeah.
we do. So
Yeah.
I don't think that there's tons of it, but I might be
Gotcha.
wrong with that. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe tell us a little bit too about what sorts of dinosaurs are known from this area in this time, and is it easy to work on these critters or is it difficult?
Yeah, I mean, they're quite enigmatic faunas.
Mm,
They've sort of long been characterized as being as showing island effects. So island
right.
effects are kind of things that we see today that occur on islands. So islands do weird things to animals, or animals living on islands do weird things. Depends how you
Yeah.
look at it. They often have a kind of different diversity. So islands are biodiversity hotspots today,
Right.
but they also sometimes the animals on them might be a kind of slightly different makeup than we see on the mainland. So they might be depauperate into certain types of animal.
Mm,
So, for example, I was recently reading about the Mediterranean islands of kind of the much more recent past. So,
right.
the Miocene
Mm-hmm.
and sort of Pliocene and Pleistocene, and they don't have any predators on them.
Right.
So, for example, we might be lacking, and then you end up with things that, because they don't have any predators, then you end up with things like flightless birds, for example, because the
Mm-hmm.
birds aren't getting eaten by any predators.
Right.
And sometimes we see there's this idea that animals kind of converged on a sort of common body size that was the sort of medium-sized body niche. So really
Mm-hmm.
small things get big, and really big things get small.
Right.
And it's quite interesting because people have tried to look at whether, or have assumed, I would say, that um, they've almost gone out and looked for these effects on
Mm-hmm.
the European islands, and
Uh-huh.
any sort of weird thing gets attributed to island effects, right? So
Right.
you get
Insular
something
dwarfism
that,
and yeah, yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So you get
Mm-hmm.
something that's a bit small, and everyone goes, ah. it's an island dwarf. Or you get something that's, and actually maybe it's just a juvenile. I mean,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
then you get something that's a bit anomalous in terms of, well, we don't have any of these anywhere else, and everyone goes, oh well, it's an endemic fauna,
Uh-huh.
because it's on an island. Was actually in the
Right.
fossil record, in the Mesozoic, almost all our faunas are endemic. We don't see them they're not very widespread, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, anyway, back to your original question, which is what do the animals on these islands look like? We have a range of kind of ornithischians that we might expect. We've got
Hmm.
some ankylosaurs, which are quite typical. We've got some, well, we'll get on to the iguanodontians or
Yeah.
not. And we've got some theropods. There's a theropod called Balor, which is has been
Right.
interpreted as a weird theropod, but it's also been interpreted as a flightless
The
bird.
bird. Yeah.
One of these problems with I think working on this stuff is a lot of it is bone bed material. And
Hmm.
again, I have not dug any of this stuff up.
Right.
So my part of this really was in the post digging. So that all of the people who really do the digging here are my colleagues Attila Osi and Zoltan Suzuki, and they are really the people who are on the ground doing field work. And Attila's been doing field work in Hungary and Central European Basin for, you know, 15, 20 years, and
Hmm.
has field seasons all the time with people out there. And so they are the people really finding this stuff. But at least my understanding is that a lot of this material is bone bed material.
Uh-huh.
So
Things
it's a
can get
little bit
jumbled up,
difficult.
and it's
It's all
like,
jumbled up. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So it's not the easiest to work with.
Hmm.
And a lot of it, I mean, the material that we have at the Natural History Museum, we've got a lot of historically collected material from this
Uh-huh.
area that was actually collected by Nopscher, who I'm sure many people will be familiar with. He's one of the
Yeah.
most important and influential paleontologists of the early 20th century. And he sold the Natural History Museum his collection. He ran out of money and sold the Natural History Museum his entire fossil
Oh, I didn't know
collection.
that.
So
Interesting.
we have all his collection. Yeah. So we
Uh-huh.
have these hadrosaurs.
Hmm.
Called Talmatosaurus from that area, from the Hatzeg Basin, and we have
Hmm.
these animals, Salmoxes, which I'm sure we'll talk about,
Right.
which he collected, some ankylosaurs, a dwarf sauropod. It's allegedly a dwarf sauropod. It's a
Uh-huh.
sauropod, a very small titanosaur called
Right.
Magyarosaurus, and there's actually a slightly larger one that's recently been named, and I forget the name of that. It was named,
Mm.
I think, last year,
Uh-huh.
but another among his material, people now recognise more than one taxon. Um, so yeah, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. It, is it difficult working in that part of the world just because you don't have as much outcrop? I mean, you mentioned coming out to Utah, where we've just got this wonderland of desert badlands all over the place. What's it like in
I
Europe?
believe so.
Yeah.
I was talking to Steve Brasati, who's one of the authors on
Yeah.
the paper, and he's been out there a lot. And he says that, actually some of their outcrops, they're basically, scrabbling around in stream beds. So they're
Right.
in streams, and they're literally like that. The outcrop is like the bed of the stream, and everything
Uh-huh.
else is grass. So I think that is an issue for sure. I think it's quite, it's difficult to find that exposure because it's lush and forested, and yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And again, just trying to like set the stage for the viewers here that if we're talking about these things being really incomplete and mysterious, there's often a really good reason for that. Like it's not the easiest
Yeah.
place to work, and there's not a whole lot of material. It's not a lot of places to look for this fossil material.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's dive into the Rhabdodontian quagmire a little bit. What is this group of dinosaurs, and what's the maybe give us a real brief rundown of the history of their study, the Rhabdodontians.
Okay, well, Raptidontids are a group of iguanodontian dinosaurs, and they are very early diverging iguanodontians. So
Mm,
they branched off before things like Dryosaurus and Camptosaurus and stuff like that. So they're right at
mm,
the base. And but they're late Cretaceous. And so they've got this very long ghost lineage. So some of their
right.
close relatives are things like Camptosaurus, which we know from the Morrison Formation 150
Yeah.
million years ago. So we have this very, very long time period where we've got these very early diverging things, but they're like massive ghost lineage. So that was weird.
Mm-hmm.
But they are known, the Rhabdodontids, they're the Rhabdodon itself is a
Mm-hmm.
single partial dentary. I can't remember exactly when it was described, but in fact, it's not even complete. It
Uh-huh.
was it's late 1800s to early 1900s sort of thing. Very, very incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not good enough we probably wouldn't name it today.
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's just too fragmentary.
Let alone
But
make it the
then what
namesake for an entire group of animals
Right,
like
right.
this. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
exactly. But then what's happened is, for reasons that I'm finding a tiny bit, as I've got into rhabdodontids, I'm like, what, why, what? Who made these decisions?
Right. Yeah.
Like, you know, um, basically anything from the late Cretaceous of Europe that looks like it might be an iguanodontian but isn't a hadrosaur appears
Uh-huh.
to have just been randomly referred to rhabdodon.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's based on a single partial dentary. So really, what we'd be looking for today by today's taxonomic standards is we'd be looking for unique features of that dentary. And then I'd
Hmm.
find another dentary and go, oh, has this dentary got the same feature? And if it has, then that would be fine. But, people just refer, I don't know, like vertebrae. There's no
Sure.
overlapping material. You can't refer a vertebra to a taxon based on a dentary, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
people have kind of done this throughout Europe. And then, and then people have named new ones, but almost all of them are based on incredibly fragmentary material. So there's one that's
Hmm.
based on a single partial maxilla, there's one that's
Uh-huh.
based on a single scapula. Um, Obviously Rhabdodon, which is just a total wastebasket taxon, which it has a time period of about 30 million years, and is just a whole no clue what
Right.
that is.
Uh-huh.
And then we have these two species from Hungary and Romania called Zalmoxes from the Hatzeg Basin that were
Hmm.
Notchia taxa, called
Right.
Zalmoxes robustus and Zalmoxes shakipororum. And these two are the best known. And in fact, Zalmoxes robustus is the best known. And this
Hmm.
is bone bed material collected by Notchia. The holotype, it was then worked on by Dave Norman and Dave Weishampel in the early
Hmm.
noughties. So these are two famous ornithischian dinosaur workers. Dave Norman was my supervisor, actually. And
Hmm.
they for reasons that I don't know, they decided to assign the holo because an option never assigned a holotype. So they decided to assign the
Interesting.
holotype.
Okay.
I think they just didn't do it at that time, right? It was just that
Right.
we hadn't kind of formulated the rules of
It's like how
taxonomic nomenclature
Megalosaurus
yet.
didn't have a species name originally. So
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
that
And the
sort of
same with
thing.
iguanodon. So yeah, exactly,
Yep.
exactly. So it's
Yeah.
just very early, right? So that they assigned this dentary as the holotype, but actually the dentary is associated with other material, with other skull material. But for
Hmm.
reasons that I don't understand, Dave didn't mention that.
Huh.
But we know it because that material is in our collection, as I said. So we can go
Right.
back through our registers, and actually we have Nopsha's notes, right? And Nopsha's handwriting on the specimens, which says, this
Right.
is individual A. And when you put
Yeah.
all the bones together from this skull, you're like, oh yeah, they all fit together. There's clearly, like a. But then there's Dave just assigned a whole bunch of postcranial material to this skull.
Uh-huh.
It's again not clear how that was done because you've got non-overlapping material. So you've got a dentary, and then they're assigning ilia or femora or whatever. It's all
Right.
bone bed material. We don't have any we don't know what's what. And then they said, oh, but there's another species. It's Zalmoxes shakipororum.
Uh-huh.
And the holotype of this was an associated postcranial skeleton. Okay, so the holotype
Okay.
of robustus is a skull. The holotype
Uh-huh.
of shakipororum is postcrania.
They're not overlapping at
Um,
all. Yeah.
not overlapping at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a bit of a mess. It's a bit of a
Uh-huh.
mess by today's taxonomic standards, basically. Rhabdodontids are they're in need of revision, and there have been a number of people. Lots of Europeans are working on this. Attila's group in
Hmm.
Hungary, Zoli's group in Romania. My friend and colleague Felix Augustin is working in Tübingen on this sort of stuff. So
Hmm.
there's a whole bunch of people who have been kind of trying to chip away at various problems to do with rhabdodontids. Um, yeah, so things are gradually becoming clearer, but there's still
Uh-huh.
a lot of mess there,
Sure,
really.
and it takes so much work to sort out all those messes that are, you know, from so long ago too, I imagine. Like you've got to do
Well, we
some.
see it is, and we do see
Yeah.
them across. It's not unique to rhabdodontids.
Of course, yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of historically named dinosaurs are really a mess. And
Oh yeah.
my colleague Paul at the Natural History Museum and I made another famous mess, all a bunch of Nomen dubiums last year, where we got rid of a dinosaur called Nanosaurus from the Morrison Formation, where we just
Right,
went, yeah,
yeah.
this is
Yeah.
not a thing, and we just kind of wiped the slate clean and went, none of that. Let's get rid of the whole
Uh-huh.
thing because it's just a nightmare. So periodically we have to kind of go through and sort of wipe the slate clean and sort all this out. But yeah,
Right.
rhabdodontids, they need a look.
Well, and I think this is really cool too because so much of that work is so essential and it's so time consuming and it can be kind of maddening sometimes. And usually it doesn't make for a really exciting paper. It's not the sort of thing that gets a lot of attention. So it's kind of like you do a lot of work for not very much reward, but you've managed to, come up with a groundbreaking paper sorting out this group to a certain extent. And I think that's really cool. You don't see that very often, I guess. So
No,
it's
I mean, I think a couple of my colleagues have emailed and said, "Wow, you got an ornithish in phylogeny in Nature. How do you do that?" But I mean,
exactly, yeah.
I think it's this is actually it is absolutely the sort of fundamental work that underpins paleontology is
Right.
this sort of taxonomic revision, and going through and looking at stuff that we thought we knew in the light of new data, and
Uh-huh.
that's it's absolutely critical and fundamental. And I don't know. I mean, I certainly the work I do, I don't do it to be applauded by the media or
Yeah, not
I
for
don't, yeah,
fortune
it's
and
not it's
glory.
not
That's yeah.
yeah I don't, no, it's not for the glory for sure. It's certainly not for the pay. So
Yeah.
I'd like to think that that I mean I do it because I like it actually. I
Hmm.
actually find I think there's nothing more enjoyable than having a good old rummage through a museum collection and finding something cool that you didn't know was there.
Uh-huh. Awesome. And so that was kind of, well, let's talk about the team that you had here on this paper. You mentioned that you didn't do a lot of the field work, that Attila was doing a lot of that back in Hungary. Who are the other members of the team, and how do they each contribute areas of their own expertise to this project?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, this project really is Attila's. He's the senior author on the paper, and
Uh-huh.
he found the specimen. So he's been
Uh-huh.
doing field work at this locality called Ikharkut. I apologize to any Hungarians listening for
I think
butchering
we
your
might have a couple
language.
in here, actually, yeah.
Okay, I apologize immediately to you. You can
It's
correct
okay. They're
me
very
for my
understanding. I
pronunciation.
wouldn't worry
They're
about it,
very well,
yeah.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, he's been doing field work at this locality for a long, long time,
Hmm.
15 years or so, and has field crews out all the time. Um, and so that's so he's found the material. He originally named Oikoceratops back in 2010. He
Hmm.
then found in the same bone bed this rhabdodontid called Moclodon verosi, which he named in 2012.
Hmm.
So he's been doing this stuff for a really long time. And he and Zoltan Suzuki have been working, who works in Romania on rhabdodontids, similar rocks, similar animals. So they
Hmm.
work together. Their students often work together. And Felix Augustin, who is working with Zoli on for his postdoc. And so they had sort of a team of people who were working on uh, this material that Attila had found, and also some more material that we have that isn't published yet that Zoli had found and Felix was working on.
Hmm.
And actually, Steve Brissati had been involved in some of the original excavations of this material of the stuff with Zoli. So
Okay.
he'd come out as I think as a postdoc at the AMNH. Mark
Hmm.
Norell was involved with that. Matthias Vermeer, who was a Hungarian paleontologist, Romanian paleontologist, sorry, was who Steve was very good friends with. They spent a lot of time working in the field together. So Steve was involved because of kind of historic fieldwork links.
Uh-huh.
But actually, he was a bit of a legend because he ended up running the Bayesian analyses for me. So that was really nice because I don't do
Nice.
Bayesian analyses. So he did the Bayesian work for me there on the paper as well. So he pulled his weight.
Uh-huh.
And then what happened was they were looking at this thing and working on it, but they wanted somebody to run their phylogenies. And that's kind of my bag. So they actually came to my friend and colleague Richard Butler at Birmingham,
Right.
whose PhD was on ornithish and phylogeny, and said, "Will you
Hmm.
run the phylogenies for us?" And he had worked with Attila on the original Ceratops paper. And Richard said, "Actually, I don't really do this stuff anymore." So he doesn't. He's kind of moved on. He doesn't really do ornithish and phylogeny. He said that
Uh-huh.
actually the person he needs to talk to is Susie because she's the person who does ornithish and phylogeny. So
Uh-huh.
they then got in touch with me and said, "Well, will you run our phylogenies?" So I then, so I was just looking at photos of this material and sort of trying to compare it and score it and stuff like this, and then having kind of meetings with everybody to find out more about the material and understand some of its anatomy. Lots and lots of meetings with Felix, with
Hmm.
him holding things up to the screen and turning them around like this and that
Uh-huh.
sort of stuff. Hours and hours spent scoring online with Attila.
Hmm.
And then actually Luke Mead, who's the final member of the team, is that your cat? It's your cat.
Well,
Okay.
it's not really my cat. She's one of my landlords here, but yeah, this is
Oh,
Mini Pie. You might see some other ones during this
Oh,
interview too.
nice. Okay.
Apologies. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, Luke's the last member of our team, and he came in because he is an absolute CT whiz. So
Nice.
we had CT scans of the skull, and what we wanted to do was I wanted to like make these really nice illustrations where we could kind of separate out the bones and show them. And I said, oh, Luke, will you do the CT work for us, the
Hmm.
segmentation? And he was like, yeah, fine. And then he started doing it, and he was like, you know what, I could actually do a really nice retro deformation of this skull, and actually we could
Right.
try and create what the skull really looked like.
Uh-huh.
And I think that was absolutely amazing, and I think actually those images really helped get it get us into nature, to be honest with you. So
Oh,
it
interesting.
really helped, but
Okay.
it also his retro deformation actually, as I was looking at it, I was like, there are some features here that I wouldn't have noticed from the very squished material. So the skull that we have is
Right.
like squished flat.
Uh-huh.
And so it did really help for us to kind of understand some more features of the anatomy. So yeah, I
That's
mean,
really cool.
everybody contributed in lots of different ways.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, when Attila sent me the pictures of this material, um, I was immediately, and there is some other material as well, which, as I say, will be forthcoming.
Oh,
Um,
really? We've got additional
I
material.
well,
Other
I
specimens?
can't comment.
Okay.
You'll
Wow.
have to wait, see.
Well, just
I'm
keep
just going to
quiet about
trail
that
that
chat.
here.
We didn't hear that here.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was looking at this material and I was like, that this is really unusual. It's a
Uh-huh.
very, very unusual thing. But I was really keen that I didn't want to bias the analysis by making it a thing that I thought.
Right.
So I started looking at Zalmoxes and which is of course great because it's in my basement at work. So I
Right.
started looking at that,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, there's something. It's just there's something really weird about this material.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
really, yeah, it's really weird. So yeah, it's interesting.
That's really cool. I do want to emphasize the digital models there. That is so cool that like actually retro deforming them, so unsquishing them in the computer actually helped with the analysis. That's
Yeah,
really
I mean,
cool. And yeah.
for example, one of the things that we were looking at was Oikoceratops has this big kind of extra hole in the side of
Yeah,
its
that other
skull, this
fenestra.
fossa. Yeah, exactly, it's
Uh-huh.
fenestra, exactly,
The
big fenestra, which we
pre-antorbital
also.
fenestra was it or
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I I think we call it an accessory antorbital or an accessory
Yeah.
fenestra or something like that. But
Uh-huh.
it is a thing that we also see in ceratopsians like Bagaceratops, and I think
Diabloceratops
Zuniceratops has
too.
one.
And
Diabloceratops has
but
one. Yeah.
Jim Kirkland called me up on the phone yesterday morning and this morning too, and he was very, very excited to tell me about this. And he was just thrilled that that made it into the paper, and he was very proud that you
Oh,
know
because of Diabloceratops. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course.
exactly, yeah,
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 and
yeah, yeah. Nice.
Zuniceratops too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, anyway, yeah. I mean, actually, the reviewers told us to put Zuniceratops in. So, yeah.
Nice.
Thanks,
Okay.
reviewers. That was a top tip.
Yeah, yeah.
But so anyway, it has this accessory fenestra, and one of the
Hmm.
criticisms previously. So a paper had come out just last year from Lukasz Sapinski and Daniel Madzia, who had
Uh-huh.
written a paper and said that Oikoceratops probably wasn't a ceratopsian, despite the
Right.
fact that there were some, clearly convergent things. And
Right.
what they'd said was that, they picked up a number of kind of differences, and one of the differences they picked up was kind of the bones roofing the top of this fenestra. And they
Right.
said, well, the bones are different. The bones are different in in Bagaceratops, but
Uh-huh.
when Luke retrodeformed the skull,
Sorry.
so that cat, he's a problem.
She is, yeah,
Oh,
she's
she.
feisty. It's okay. Mini Pie, hey, we're trying to have a professional interview here, please. Thank you. Sorry, Susie.
So when when Luke retrodeformed the skull, we could see
Uh-huh.
that actually maybe those bones weren't different, and maybe that with that retro deformation there was actually spaces where maybe the nasals did contact this, and maybe da 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 da. So it
Right.
actually really helped us to say, well, maybe actually that inference is wrong, and actually
Hmm.
this anatomy does exist in this animal. So that was interesting.
Interesting. Um, that reminds me of the premaxillae versus the rostral. That's a really interesting thing about this critter. And here I should show you this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for making these available. I was able to 3D print the premaxillae right here. So
Oh wow, that's amazing.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I did this overnight, and yeah, it's really interesting in that like I was telling the chat earlier before our interview, with ceratopsians, generally they've got this, the rostral bone is separate from the premaxillae, so they've got this extra beak bone there, and yet we don't really see that with Oikoceratops, or maybe we do. I wanted to get your take on that, because I know that was one of the reasons why other authors have questioned the idea of Oikoceratops actually being a ceratopsian. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
what's your take on that?
I mean, I don't know the answer. I'll be
Yeah,
honest with you.
it's weird,
In
right?
the
Yeah.
phylogeny, yeah, in the
Uh huh.
phylogeny, we scored it as not having a rostral.
Uh huh.
And actually, we clarified one of the characters to make it possible for us to score it as not having a rostral. So what I
Gotcha.
didn't want to
Okay.
do was
Uh huh.
score it as having a rostral when we
And then have that skew your
and
whole
then have
analysis.
right,
Yeah.
well, and have people say, "Oh, you're just fixing it," you know.
Uh
So
huh.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know whether it's got a rostral or not. But what it
Uh
does
huh.
have is it has, as you have just shown, is it has this
Hmm.
very rugose, very
Yeah.
pitted and
Yeah.
downwardly curved
Uh
beak.
huh.
Yeah, so it's got this very downwardly curved beak. It's also got, yeah, you can probably just about see from the thing you're holding up.
Uh huh.
The sides of the premaxilla are kind of indented in a sort of fossy
Right.
relative to
They
that
pitch in
knobbly
right here.
outside bit. Right, yeah, exactly
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it looks like a premaxilla. Sorry, it
Uh
looks
huh.
like a rostral, but there
It
is no
does.
suture between the two. We can't see a suture in the fossil, and also in the CT scans, I specifically asked Luke to look for any evidence of a suture, and he couldn't find one. Now,
Interesting.
a thing that was super
Yeah.
cool was that in that hook-like bit at the front
Uh huh.
of the premaxilla, the vasculature of that was infilled with an iron cement, and that meant that in the CT scans it like shone, and so
Oh, okay.
Luke was
Yeah.
able to segment out the vasculature and show that this kind of front of the snout is really really well vascularized, and we don't
Hmm.
really see anything like that in any other ornithischian. The
Right.
only thing that we kind of looks a little bit like that is the rostrals of things like Protoceratops, or fairly sort of Neoceratopsians basically.
Uh huh.
So um, it looks like a rostral. It
It
is
does.
not
Yeah.
like the premaxilla of other ornithischians, but we can't see any sutures. So I think there's two things that are going on. It
Uh huh.
either does have a rostral, and it's fused at a very early ontogenetic stage, so it
Right.
obliterates the suture. And we
Because
do know,
the other
go on,
ceratopsids do this usually later
we
in
do.
ontogeny. But yeah, so that's not unheard
Usually
of.
later in ontogeny, but it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
unheard of. And
Yeah.
there are even psittacosaurids in which you have no suture, no visible
Oh,
suture.
interesting. Okay.
Not all species, but some apparently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the or
Ontogeny.
it doesn't have a rostral, and
Uh
it
huh.
just has a very convergent morphology of the beak. And I mean, I guess it's
Right.
possible, and I'm just totally speculating here, that maybe if these are ceratopsians, we're right, and that they have this the rostral is a synapomorphy of ceratopsia. All ceratopsians
Sure.
have it.
Yeah.
Maybe they just didn't ossify it. So maybe what we've got is this like kind of
Huh.
pitted texture where something would have ossified, but actually it's like cartilage. So maybe they didn't ossify it. So I don't know. I don't know what the
Interesting.
answer is, but I
Uh
didn't
huh.
want to fix the analysis, so I scored it as not having a rostral.
Admirable. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Um. So I want to talk a little bit about, you do erect a new dinosaur taxon in this paper, Ferenceratops.
That's right.
Tell us the story there, because if I try and tell this to Chad, I'm going to butcher it because it's a little bit complicated.
It
This is
is.
our
It
first new dinosaur of 2026, which is exciting. What was the reasoning behind it? Like,
okay.
what
So
convinced you that
so
this should be a new name?
well, as I said earlier, I was talking about
Uh-huh.
Zalmoxes, these two different types of Zalmoxes robustus and Zalmoxes shakipororum,
Right.
and uh, what we have done is taken Shakipororum out of the genus Zalmoxes and given it a new generic name. So we've made it Ferenceratops
Gotcha.
uh, Shakipororum. And
Uh-huh.
Ferens, it was the birth name of Nopsha. So we've named it after Nopsha effectively.
Nice. Yeah.
But the reasoning is that so we did a whole bunch of different analyses, and in all of them,
Uh-huh.
Ferenceratops shakipororum comes out as a ceratopsian,
Right.
whereas with Zalmoxes robustus,
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's an ornithopod still, and sometimes it's a ceratopsian. So
Right.
because they what the results of the analysis would do would be to make the genus Zalmoxes no longer monophyletic. So
Sure.
those two species wouldn't be cystotaxa anymore. So we wanted to make it, I guess we're hedging our bets a bit, because
Sure.
actually,
Yeah.
in all honesty, I'm pretty sure that Zalmoxes robustus is a ceratopsian, but because
Okay.
our analyses didn't show it all the time, we
Uh-huh.
decided to split them up and name Shakipororum as a new genus.
Gotcha. Yeah. So in many ways in this paper, even though it's, very surprising and it's proved to be a little bit controversial, you're kind of taking the more conservative approach with a lot of these things. You're being a lot less, I don't know, you're not going out on a limb as much as you could be with a lot of these things.
We're not making stuff up, Danny.
Exactly,
We
yeah.
literally we ran the analyses, and that's what it said. And one of the
Uh-huh.
reviewers actually, he wrote, I don't, you've not really made it clear why you think that in the first draft, why you think
Yeah.
that Ferroceratops is a ceratopsian. I was like, because that's where it comes out in phylogeny. It's not
Yeah.
about its anatomy; it's where it comes out in phylogeny. The anatomy's
Uh-huh.
weird. What I know is that the anatomy is extremely weird. And that also both cranially and postcranially, iguanodontians and ceratopsians are extremely convergent. And
Hmm.
there's a couple of reasons for this. I mean, firstly, they evolved from a common ancestor.
Yeah.
So they've got
Right,
like the
the same
same, I
starting
guess.
point way far
Right,
back. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But then they both evolved complex chewing mechanisms in their mouth. So they both
Hmm.
evolved dental batteries and megaherbivory independently of each other.
Right.
And they both evolved quadrupedality independently of each other and large
Hmm.
body size. So there are only a certain number of pathways from the same
Exactly.
starting point to achieve the
Yep.
same endpoint. So there's an enormous amount of convergence between these two groups, and it is really, really difficult to tease these apart. And I think that's been mainly the reason why people haven't really recognized uh, some of these rhabdodontids as being ceratopsians in the past. There are
Right.
some really, really, really obvious features, however, which are present in things like Ferroceratops. They're also present in something that was recently described as the K2 rhabdodontid. It hasn't been given a name. It's an indeterminate
Huh.
rhabdodontid that was described by my colleague Zoli recently. And I think as we go and look, it'll be present in some others, which is some features of the pelvis, which
Hmm.
are absolutely clear for and synapomorphic for ceratopsians, but they're just not
Right.
present in they're just ornithopods, or it's the other way around actually. Ornithopods have them, ceratopsians don't have them. So it's
Right.
the
Like
a
the
feature on the
obturator prong
ischium.
and
It's
stuff
the
like that.
obturator
Yeah,
process
yeah.
on the ischium is an
Yeah.
absolute 100%. All ornithopods have it, and
Hmm.
and Ferroceratops doesn't have it. And
What?
there's really, I mean, it just doesn't. It just has a ceratopsian ilium. That's what it
Uh-huh.
is. Ischium. That's what it is. I mean, like I don't know. It looks like a ceratopsian ischium.
Hmm.
So the hips, when you look at the hips, I mean, do you know, in 2012, I think
Uh-huh.
I wrote a paper. I was working on the evolution of quadrupedality in ornithischian dinosaurs, and I looked at Zalmoxes. I looked at all of the ornithischians in the NHM's collections,
Hmm.
and I looked at Zalmoxes and I was like, the hips on this animal are super weird and they don't look like any other iguanodontian at this part of
Right.
the tree. They're very, very strange. In fact, they don't look like any other iguanodontian at all. And
Uh-huh.
do you know what? So I made it, I said, actually, and I have a paper in which I say, Zalmoxes is quadrupedal.
Uh-huh.
And this is a sort of independent evolution of quadrupedality on the line of iguanodontia. So you've got all these bipeds, and then you've got Zalmoxes shooting off to be quadrupedal, and then you've got quadrupedality evolving later among sort
Uh-huh.
of more hadrosauroids. And anyway, obviously now
Right.
I realized if I'd been thinking properly at that time or knew what I knew now about ceratopsian anatomy, I would have, maybe it would have. It's
Uh-huh.
quadrupedal because it's a ceratopsian.
Right. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so,
Suddenly
so
it makes
I,
sense. Yeah.
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 So I
Yeah.
recognized this. I just didn't realize I'd recognized it in 2012.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, I was talking about that a little bit before our stream today, how, for myself and a lot of the people who are here in the audience, one of our favorite things about vertebrate paleontology is how a new fossil discovery can make us completely rethink an entire group of animals sometimes. And this is one of these examples, and it's so cool that we get to see this happening right now before our eyes. Um, it's exciting stuff. That being said, if there were some crazy discovery that were to be made that makes critters like Oikoceratops an ornithopod again, was trying to imagine what would that have to be? What would have to be true in order for this critter to become an ornithopod again?
I mean, I actually think it's plausible.
Yeah,
I don't think it's out of the question. And of course, we're scientists, right? And so
yeah,
the answer is based on the data that you have available to you.
Right.
at the time. And at the moment, we're running these analyses that are based on the data that we have available to us, and that information is telling us that the best explanation right now, based on this current material, is that it's is that a ceratopsian. But I'm not going to rule out that we find the postcrania, or
Uh-huh.
we think we have the postcrania right. Mochelodon is a synonym of Oikoceratops, and so we have a lot of postcrania.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess uh, what would it have to be? I mean, I don't know.
It's
I
not an
mean,
easy question, so I'm really putting you on the spot with this, but
it's not an easy question,
yeah.
because actually for me the postcrania is really compelling.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I work much more on legs than I've worked on heads, and I
Yeah.
think it's interesting. Actually, Felix, I'm sure he won't mind me telling you this, was working on the head, and he was
Hmm.
like, I mean, Felix really didn't buy this at all. He was like, not down with this, and he was very skeptical.
Uh-huh.
And then he started working on the postcrania. He was like, oh yeah, okay, 100%. See where you're going. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I think the postcrania for me is really compelling.
Uh-huh.
I guess, if we find a really nice, complete articulated skull, and it's like absolutely, I don't know, like it's got, we know the teeth. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess if somebody else runs an analysis and they get a different answer, then I'll be like, okay, well, fair enough, you got a different answer. So
Uh-huh.
if you based it on observation of the material, and you've scored the material and you get a different answer, then that's obviously the best available explanation of that data set.
Right. Yeah. Okay, fair, fair. Um, let's maybe talk about Raptidontians again for a minute. I don't want anybody walking away from this stream thinking that like, oh, all Raptidontians have to be ceratopsians now. There's some nuance in there, right? And I want to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance in there, and actually,
Yeah.
most people have been incredibly enthusiastic about this. There's been a bit of
Uh-huh.
pushback by someone on Facebook. I'm not on
Uh-huh.
Facebook, so I'm only getting screen grabs sent to me of this. But this
Right.
person doesn't seem to have actually read the paper, because they seem to think that we're suggesting that literally everything that's ever been called even a rhabdodontomorph is a ceratopsian, and we're
Gotcha.
absolutely not.
Uh-huh.
There are clearly iguanodontian dinosaurs in late Cretaceous of Europe.
Uh-huh.
We scored a taxon that we call the Aix Rhabdodon, because Rhabdodon is this complete indeterminate wastebasket
Sure,
thing.
yeah. Yeah.
But there are two skeletons from France, from Aix-en-Provence, and they were found like right next to each other, and
Uh-huh.
they're articulated skeletons, and they've never been brilliantly described. One of them was described in the 90s, and the other one's never been described, but it's been described in a PhD thesis, so you can get pictures of it online,
Okay.
and which is what we scored them based on. And they are, we find in all of our analyses that comes out as an iguanodontian. It's clearly as an iguanodontian. You look at it, it looks just like Tenontosaurus to me. It's clearly an iguanodontian.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I mean, we're absolutely not saying that all of the rhabdodontids are ceratopsians. What we are saying is that Mochlodon verosi is a ceratopsian, because it's also the same as Oikoceratops, and that
Right.
Zalmoxes, probably Zalmoxes robustus, and definitely Phaeronceratops shikiparorum is. And the
Uh-huh.
others we'll have to wait and see until we put them in a phylogeny, or we figure out what they are. And some of them, I've got to be honest with you, are almost certainly indeterminate,
Nice. Okay.
because they're based on single partial elements. So
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, getting into a different group of dinosaurs for a minute. Do you mind if I ask you about Jacopil, because you were a reviewer
oh
on that
yeah,
paper, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I remember, I think maybe you posted part of your review, made it public. Um, for those in the audience who are maybe not familiar, Jacopil is this really weird ornithischian dinosaur from northern Argentina, is it? I
I
think
think so.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Really bizarre looking animal. It got a lot of attention a few years back because it's just really strange, and it's been interpreted as kind of a basal ankylosaur type thing, so an armored dinosaur. But
Yeah, a
it's
basal
so
tyrophoran, I
strange
think.
looking
Yeah.
that yeah, yeah. I remember you saying that you thought there's a chance it could be a weird South American ceratopsian. What was your thinking there? Because it's so fragmentary that it's difficult to tell. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so I mean, it's really interesting when that paper. So I got that paper to review, and it was in. I think it was had been sent to Scientific Reports, and it was
uh-huh,
by Facundo Righetti, who I know sort of vaguely. And anyway, I got this paper, and I was like, my mind was blown, and I emailed him straight away and said, you
yeah,
need to pull this and submit it to Nature, because this is super cool. And anyway, and
yeah,
also I think you need to rerun your phylogenies.
uh-huh,
But anyway, yeah, he said that he ran the phylogenies a bunch of times and he couldn't make it anything but a thyreophorine.
Uh-huh.
But they, you know, they did do a good job on the paper. And when I posted some bits of my review because I couldn't be bothered to write out all my thoughts on it again, to be honest with you. But
Fair, yeah. You're busy.
I think I was on a train and I was like, oh, I'm on my phone, I'll just post it. But
Yeah.
anyway, it was an overwhelmingly positive review. I think I hope it was constructive. But anyway, and what I wanted to do was highlight totally the bonkersness of this animal. It
Yeah.
is so
Yeah.
weird. It's a biped.
Uh-huh.
It's got armor, but the thing that really got me as I was looking at all the pictures and all the supplementary data that they submitted and everything,
Hmm.
um, was like what it doesn't have is any features of armored dinosaurs except for the armor. Right.
Right.
It has
Yeah.
no, there are a number of synapomorphies of armored dinosaurs, a number of features that we look for to make something an armored dinosaur, and it doesn't have any of them.
Right.
And the only thing that it does have that is the armor,
Is the
right?
armor, yeah.
But
Yeah.
body armor has evolved, a bunch of times in archosaurs. It pops up all over the archosaur family
Yep.
tree. So the idea
Yeah,
that
yeah.
and even in other dinosaurs, right? Titanosaurs,
Sure.
I suppose, have
Yeah.
armor plates. So I don't think it's inconceivable that another sort of dinosaur at some point might have evolved body armor that we don't know about yet.
Sure.
Especially
Yeah.
from somewhere that is poorly sampled in the fossil record. The thing that made me go, could it be? I don't know whether I said ceratopsian or marginocephalian, but anyway, so
Hmm.
marginocephalia is ceratopsia plus pachycephalosauria.
Brachycephalosauria. Yeah,
So
yeah.
when I looked at the teeth, so I said, when I got this paper, I went down to the collection and I just went through. It's a great thing about working where I work in the Natural History Museum because you have all these like reference specimens to hand. So you just go through and like rummage around until you find one,
Right,
right?
yeah.
So I went and looked for some pachycephalosaur teeth and like was trying to compare them, and I was comparing, and the teeth are really odd. So the closest teeth that I could come up with was a pachycephalosaur, and then it has this
Uh,
very deep jaw.
uh-huh.
So it's got this kind of like ventral flange on the jaw. And that is something, and it's got a very short jaw. And that is something that we see in some Neoceratopsians, not in all, but in some.
Right.
So I
Things
think
like
Bagaceratops
Bagaceratops.
again.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
these has these very deep jaws. And some of them have slightly different morphology. Some are very curved and some are actually like
Right.
actually deep.
Uh-huh.
But that very short, very deep dentary um, made me wonder, and the teeth and the tooth morphology made me wonder if it was some sort of weird ceratopsian. I don't know, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's a completely new lineage that we have no record of
Uh-huh.
elsewhere, and it's just
Interesting.
it's something
Yeah.
completely different. So
And I
we
mean,
need it. We need
that's
some more material, though, I think.
exactly, yeah. It's almost the
Yeah.
same story with your ceratopsians in Europe, where the material is so limited, and we're trying to do the best we can with very, very limited material. There's so many cool things still out there to be discovered. Um, yeah. It if you had a, $5 million grant to go try and find
Lol.
like the missing piece of the puzzle here, that the Rosetta Stone, being goofy about this, for say European ceratopsids or
Mm.
ceratopsians, um where would you look,
Well, that's an interesting question because uh, I think there's a difference. So sometimes sampling is an issue, right? And there's a
Yeah.
difference between there not having been enough sampling because we don't have enough money to do the work,
Yes.
or
Not
there
enough
not being
outcrop.
enough sampling because there's not enough outcrop. And I suspect that with the European ceratopsians, that is the problem. What I
Uh-huh.
really want to do, this is totally geeky and
Hmm.
totally self-indulgent, but I'm probably going to do it anyway, is
Uh-huh.
actually I would take your £5 million grant, and I would really like you to give me a £5,000 grant instead, and just let me go around all of those little museums in France and Spain
Okay.
that have drawers full of material that they claim is Rabdodon, and let me go through all
Uh-huh.
of that and have a good old rummage around and see what's in all of those, because I think the answer probably, if it's
Hmm.
out there, it's probably already been found.
Right.
And we just need to actually, what we need to do is what we probably don't need to do is find more crap. What we probably
Uh-huh.
need to do is actually work on what we've got and figure out what that is. And in another, I say that in a better way,
Uh-huh.
revised what we think we knew in the light of new data.
Gotcha. Okay. That's a really good answer. And I think it kind of highlights the importance of collections. I mean, this is something that
Yeah.
I talk about all the time on this channel, is, that is the beating heart of any museum is its collections. Could you talk maybe a little bit about that and how important the collections have been to this project, especially like being there
Yeah,
on site at the NHM?
I mean, it's really helpful because it allows us to score all this stuff firsthand. So, I can sit there with the specimen in front of me, and then I'm like, oh, has it got this feature?
Uh-huh.
No, it's critical. It's really really helpful.
Uh-huh.
But also, I mean, I think that there is this sort of perception that sometimes that museum collections are like a storage, and people will say, oh, is it in your stores?
Right.
It's not. They're not stores.
We
It's
have
more like a
storage as
lab.
well. It's the
Yeah,
collections
yeah,
is the
yeah,
stuff that's
yeah.
been prepped, it's been poured over. It's yeah,
Exactly,
it
exactly.
it's so much more refined than that, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so I'm trying to kind of encourage everybody to call
Yeah.
our collections our lab, because that's what it is, right? We
Yeah.
have people who are down there studying every single day, who are down there every day, and the Natural History Museum has one of the world's most important and diverse Ornithischian dinosaur collections. So we have,
Right.
from the earliest Ornithischian right the way through to late Cretaceous ones. We've got more thyreophorans than we have than any other museum. So we've got a incredibly diverse
Really?
Ornithischian dinosaur collection,
Okay.
and so we have a huge number of visitors. I used to
Uh-huh.
be the curator of the collection. I used to look after the collection and look after
Uh-huh.
collections visitors in my previous role. And I think the last year that I did it fully, we had 300 visitor days to the collection in a year. So that's like one, sometimes I'd have two visitors in one day, and that would be two
Sure,
days,
yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
it's used that heavily. So there
That's
aren't even
impressive.
300
Wow.
working days in the year, right? So
Right.
it incredibly, incredibly, incredibly heavily used. And ours is not unique. If you go to any major museum around the world, you'll find that there are people working in the collections all the time.
Right.
And that doesn't even include us, and our
Uh-huh.
students and the people who come and work with us because they want to work on this collection.
Right.
And it's just, it's really, really critical for everything that we need to do.
Awesome. Yeah. Before we wrap up here, I want to ask about how you feel about how the paper's been received so far. You said a lot of people do seem to be really excited about it. Um, is this what you were expecting? Are you happy with the reception so far?
Yeah, I can't believe
Yeah.
it. I thought that we would have a lot more pushback, to be honest with
Uh-huh.
you.
Yeah.
I so many people have written to me and gone, "Oh my God, this is cool," without going, "You're nuts," which is really nice. So
Yeah.
it's really, yeah, I'm delighted. I thought that people would be more skeptical. Some people who, I mean, so Eric Bouffetot wrote to me earlier and said, "Oh
Uh-huh.
yeah, now you say it, they do kind of look like ceratopsians, don't they?" And I was like, "Thanks, Eric. Oh my God." He's somebody, really senior French paleontologist
Yeah,
who's
yeah.
worked on this stuff since before I was born, basically. It's
Uh-huh.
really nice to have that kind of feedback. So yeah, I'm delighted. I'm delighted, and I think that probably as I say, that I've only seen one dissenter so far who actually said that our paper was a scam, which I thought was a bit much.
Wow.
But I just would encourage him to read the paper.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I do really appreciate how you just lay everything out on the paper. You make the specimens available as digital models. It's you really show your work with it, and that's not always easy to do with a nature paper, given that it's so short generally.
Yeah.
It's uh, I don't know. I was impressed with it.
Thank you,
I
Danny.
think
I
I
appreciate that. That's kind.
yeah. I think I told you that at SVP I was really excited for your talk, and I was sitting next to Karen Poole, who also works on Ornithischian dinosaur phylogeny, and Karen was just losing her mind during this talk. Not in a I don't believe this, this is crazy kind of way, but like, oh my god, suddenly all of these things make sense. And it was just kind of a magical moment, you know? That was one of the highlights of the conference for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah, thank you for that, Susan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Karen works with Kathy Forster,
Uh huh.
who again, ornithischian dinosaur worker, has worked a lot on ornithischian
I got
phylogeny,
to
and
meet
she
her
was
this
my
year at
PhD
SVP.
examiner.
Really, really. Oh,
Oh,
she
do you?
was.
Great. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
cool. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she examined my PhD. So she, I somebody who I've always had a great deal of respect for and have been a
Uh
tiny bit scared of. And
huh.
but she's lovely. She's really nice. But she, oh, I guess scared is the wrong word. But somebody who I would like to have a good opinion of my work.
Yeah,
I would
absolutely.
like her
Yeah.
respect
You care
basically.
about what she
And
thinks.
I
Absolutely. Her
care about
opinion
what
means a
she
lot to you.
thinks.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And she actually, as I walked off the stage, she was like 3 rows back
Uh huh.
from the front, and she went. I bent down and she went, "I want to talk to you." I was like, "Okay, Kathy, yes." And anyway, she went, "Come and find me at my poster."
Uh huh.
So anyway, I went and found her. And anyway, she was like, "Oh my God, this is so cool. I've got to tell you about my phylogeny, your phylogeny." Rah, rah, rah. And I was like, "Oh,
Uh
whew." I was,
huh.
yeah, so that was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, I I also want to ask about what are some things about this paper that you don't want to see misrepresented? Because we talk about this a lot on my channel about how oftentimes in popular media, science gets misrepresented either intentionally or
Mm.
unintentionally. What are some things that you were careful uh, to talk about in the press that you've overseen for this? And what are some things you maybe might want to
Yeah,
emphasize to the viewers too?
I mean, I think a thing that's really important to me is to emphasize that, my role in this was really the analysis,
Gotcha.
and that this, that lots of the hard work really and years of hard work were done by Attila,
Oh yeah.
long before I was ever involved with this. And he's the senior author on the paper, and that
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really his work. And I just went like 010101 enter, and it popped up, right?
Uh-huh.
So, I really want to emphasize that. And I think that um, what you said about that we're not changing all we're not saying that all
Right.
Rabdodon. There are definitely iguanodontians in the late Cretaceous of Europe,
Yeah.
and there might even be a clade. I don't think so. I think they're probably just, a grade, but there might
Interesting.
be.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think we need to, get rid of the term Rabdodontids. But we're not saying that all of these taxa that have previously been described as in this area of the tree are now ceratopsians by any
Right.
means.
So
Um,
rhabdodontids would become like hypsilophodontids, where
right, exactly.
it's just a general shape of things, but they're not actually related to one another necessarily super
Right,
closely.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly
Okay.
that. And I think probably I would like to emphasize that, yeah, I think the importance of taxonomy, and doing
Yeah.
taxonomy right and making
Uh-huh.
sure that we have really good holotypes and that we're referring material correctly based on synapomorphies and autapomorphies, and we're taking a real kind of strict autapomorphy based approach to our taxonomy, and that will
Right.
really help us to yeah, to make sure that we're not making mistakes.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think that they're probably the things. That's quite niche, isn't it? Sorry about that, but I think that's probably
No,
the
no,
things.
this is great. Yeah, that's why I asked you. Um, and before we wrap up, I want to ask too, would you have any advice for people who are watching right now who maybe want to get more involved in paleontology, either in a professional capacity or they just want to learn more about how paleontology works? They might want to volunteer, stuff like that. What advice could
Yeah,
you give to
sure.
the audience? Yeah.
Well, I think there's lots of different ways to get involved. I think if you sort of want to be an academic paleontologist, it's hard. There's not that many jobs out there,
No.
and it's it's a tough thing to do, but you have to stick with it and you have to publish papers. That's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. Don't be a perfectionist. That's
Right.
bad. I think there it's much easier but you can be involved in paleontology in ways that don't involve you being an academic, right? You can be
Absolutely.
a science communicator, you can be a preparator, you can
Mm-hmm.
you can do all sorts of different things in and around fossils that are sort of paleontology adjacent, that don't involve you being an academic. And I
Right.
think there's lots of different ways to do that. um, People I get tons of emails from people asking me if they can join my field work, which
Uh-huh.
unfortunately usually the answer is no, because I don't have regular kind of field campaigns like people in the States do, because we just simply don't have the funding to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I usually try and put them in touch with people who do have that. So people like Lindsay Zano, Harry
Mm-hmm.
Woodruff, and actually Attila. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some of the Polish guys actually do digs where people can go out and you can go as a
Oh,
student
cool.
and you can experience digging and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Josh, of course, we already talked about Josh
Yep.
Lively. He
Josh
will
Lively.
he
Yeah.
will take people like that. So there's a whole bunch of people who do. So I'm always really happy to direct people. But you can do that. You can go and get experienced in digging up dinosaurs and other fossils. By asking the right people, and often they're very, very happy to have people along.
Right. We need
Just
volunteers.
grunt
Yeah.
grunt
Absolutely.
work, yeah.
Yeah.
um, so
Yeah.
that's nice. I think you can obviously any like go along to your local museum and see whether they have volunteering positions available.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of kind of online stuff in the UK. We have stuff for kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's an organization for kids called Rock Watch, which is kind of more geology, but very involved with paleontology as well.
Cool.
And there's a whole bunch of kind of more um, avocational societies. So we have the
Mm-hmm.
Geologist Association here in the UK, but I'm sure that there's equivalents as well.
Yeah,
in the States.
we've
So
got a
yeah.
bunch in in different states. Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Susie. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Where can people find more Susie Maidment? Is there anything you'd like to plug? And tell us about your
No. Oh,
podcast too,
I
actually.
have a podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'll get shot by Rob, my co-podcast host, if I don't plug it. So we have a very, very geeky niche podcast called The Fossil Files. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Hmm.
And we tend to tweet episodes out on Blue Sky. Then it's not called tweet, post episodes out on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
But Fossil Files. And what we do in the Fossil Files is we take usually a recently published paper, and we do a kind of journal club on it. You know, we read the paper,
Uh-huh.
we interpret it, we say what we think, have a little chat about it, crack some jokes, that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Sometimes we're
Excellent.
funny, sometimes we're boring. You never know what you're going to get.
That's why
But we're
there's a
quite
fast forward
short.
button, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Susie. Really appreciate your time. I know it's really late there, so thank you for, staying up late for us and joining
Pleasure.
us after a long work day and everything else. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you had fun too.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Danny. It's great.
Of course. Yeah. Cool. Well, we'll see you next time. Thanks again,
Speak to you
Susie.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.